Hey there, Knicks fans. How you doing? I'm a little too happy after a loss. I should cry, but how do I not be happy after a game like that? All right, I'm going to save it. Welcome to another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. Thrilled that you could be with us to start off your week. Of course, I'm coming at you on a Monday, which means I am not alone. I am with my esteemed co-host, my better half. He's the brains of the operation. He might be the brawn too. He always, I know he goes to the gym diligently. So credit to him for all of those things. Jeremy Cohen, hello, sir.
Hello. I actually haven't been to a gym in like 11 months.
Well,
I appreciate that.
You used to go to the gym on the regular.
I did. Yeah. Now it's more home workouts, which it's hard to do, especially when it's this cold out. You don't really want to go outside. You don't want to do anything. But yeah, it's a new life.
I'm pretty proud of myself. I did go for a run earlier today before the game.
Very nice.
Yeah. It was something about when you run in sub 30 degree temperature, it makes you feel like more of a man, which I'll take anytime I can get it. So we have a jam-packed show because boy, is there a lot going on in Knicks land. So the crux of today's episode is going to be, are we celebrating the 2-year anniversary?
We're acknowledging it.
We're acknowledging the
2-year anniversary.
The 2-year anniversary of the Kristaps Porzingis trade. And we're going to get into that a little bit. We're also going to formally introduce, we kind of did this last week, a new segment on the pod called Progress Report, because we are Knicks Film School. So we're going to give a little progress update on some of the Knicks young players. And boy, is that going to be fun after the game we just saw today. But first, I just want to spend a couple of minutes on the Clipper game that just ended a few minutes ago. If you missed it, be sure to check out right on your podcast stream, actually, my reactions after the game. I spoke for about 25 minutes, answered some questions. So if you want to hear my full thoughts, go there. But Jeremy, we came on and before we started recording, remind me what you said. You were like, I said, we have to open with this. And now, of course, I'm blanking.
I said, the one thing that the Knicks will desperately need moving forward is a closer. And it doesn't mean that it can't be RJ, it can't be Randall, it can't be Emmanuel Quickley. It's just they need one more guy who can be there, put pressure on the defense and be a potent scorer. Yes, obviously you want them in towards the end of the game, but it sometimes feels like with the starting backcourt that you have, you're digging yourself into a hole, or you're not getting ahead of your opponent, because the one consistent thing we've seen is the Knicks are great in the first half, and then other teams make adjustments in the second half. And it's not that the Knicks can't or don't, rather, it's just they don't have the talent to leap them to that level where, like in a game like today, the Clippers are just too good. We talk about luck from 3-point range. I mean, they were phenomenal. They shot 17 of 38. Shout out Fetty Wap. That's just an incredible performance. And
17.
So, that's just.
You really just did that.
I did.
You really just did that.
Yeah, baby. How am I not going to shout out Fetty Wap with that number?
I don't
get many opportunities to do that. So
I'm a massive Fetty Wap. Is there a phrase, like, am I a Wap? Am I a Fetty head? Am I a Wap head? I'm Italian, so I guess that makes me a Wap, right?
Well, I can't say that, but you can.
I did just say that.
That's fair. That's fine.
Okay. So I'll call myself a WAP head. Anyway, Jesus Christ, we're off to a rousing start.
Yeah.
This was a game that to me was maybe the clearest indication of where the Knicks are/could be with this roster, because I don't think the Knicks could have played this game any better. And like you said, it was just they're a guy short. Like one team had Kawhi Leonard and the other team didn't, and that was that. And there's no shame in that. But boy, would I have loved to see this version of the Knicks play this game with pick your guy. Victor Oladipo, Bradley Beal, Zach LaVine, and we'll spend time over the next couple weeks and months talking about those guys. But yeah, I did think the only thing I want to echo from what I said already on the post game was this felt important. It felt important both for the players that showed up today and did what they did, and we'll get into that during progress report. But it just like to come out there and take the haymakers, and there were a few haymakers from that Clipper team, one after another, and hang in that game until the very end. Just this to me felt like maybe one of those games that we're going to look back on down the line and be like, maybe they turned a corner on that Sunday afternoon. What do you think?
Yeah, again, it's just like the level of effort and competitiveness that they had on a Sunday matinee game, especially after a long road trip. And yes, I mean, they were home for the Cavs game, but that was a grinder in itself for at least the first half, and second half things certainly got better. It's so funny how things can transpire where it's like, this was a great performance by the Knicks, put up 115 points against, I think the Clippers are like the fourth best defense. And yet they couldn't even score 100 in Sacramento against one of the worst defenses of all time. I mean, again, so it's just, you kind of look at these games and you take the good with the bad. But again, like, this is one of those losses where it's like, you want to say there's a silver lining and you're kind of feeling like, well, am I just saying that? But here it genuinely is. It's just, this was a very competitive game. I think if RJ had gotten in a little bit sooner in the fourth quarter, maybe it would have stopped what became some bleeding. But, I mean, you could look at a few different things at the end. The Clippers are just the better team. They are an elite team. And it was neck and neck for a while, and then it just wasn't. You just have to tip your hat and move on to the next game. Yeah.
You put it really well. I'm not going to belabor the point. The Clippers are 8th in defense, by the way, and they are. To say that they're third in offense, but that doesn't really speak to how tough of a matchup they were for the Knicks today, because they are, not only are they the best shooting team from three in the league this year, they are on track to become the best 3-point shooting team the league has seen in literally decades. Just not, and they were even above that today. So, tough game. Knicks were a guy short, and that's fine. But so that's a good transition. So we'll do this quick, and then we'll get to the crux of the show, which is the KP thing. Progress report. Before we get there, Jeremy, I'm going to ask you, and I'll give my quick story. Did you have any memorable instances in your life? I did not tell you about this beforehand because I wanted this to be off the cuff, where you got like a report card or something or whatever. It's like, it stands out in your mind. I have one that I'll share very quickly. No pun intended. I really can't say that word anymore because now every time I say it, I'm going to think of our rookie. I was in 8th grade. And I fancied myself a smart lad, and I wanted to become, what is it, valedictorian? What's the top one?
Valedictorian.
Valedictorian. And I got my report card, and I got a 93. And I remember it. I remember like it was yesterday. I got a 93 in one subject, and the rest of it were like 99s, 98, 100. And it was a competitive school. And I saw that there was a girl in my class, and she had gotten straight 99s and 98s and 100. And I knew at that moment that my dream of being a valedictorian had died. And I cried like a little boy right there in the cafeteria as an 8th grader. It was not one of my finest moments, but I did want to share it because I whatever harsh assessments we give in our progress reports from here on in, I want those players, because of course they listen, to feel better about it. And just know that at least you're not crying like a little wimp because you got a 93 in whatever I got a 93 in. So that's my progress report story. Do you have any notable ones?
God, I'm sure I do. I'm trying to think of what comes to mind.
It could be a happy one. It doesn't have to be a sad one.
Sure. You know what? I'll take a happy one. So in 9th grade,
okay,
first semester of high school, first year of high school, I had to take biology. And for some reason, science and we don't click. We're like water and oil, which is also scientific, really? I guess. Yeah,
I would not have guessed that.
Really? No, I'm much more humanities and math. Okay. I'm pretty good at, but not great at. But no, like humanities, language, like liberal arts, that stuff's my bread and butter. But so for science, I'm really not good. And as you are probably very familiar, John, New York State has the Regents exams. And I had to take bio. I was just like, I was doing okay. I really want to do better, but it was just okay. It was like, I think 80 my first semester. I was like, this is not good. I can't do this. And I just worked really hard at it. And then I had to take the bio Regents, and I hit the books harder than I think I'd ever hit in my entire life. And granted, I was 14, but I thought I was going to fail the Regents. I wound up getting a 90 in bio, which was like fantastic for me. And then I got a 90 on my report card. So
that's good enough for with honors, right? Or advanced Regents diploma, whatever the upper thing is. Yeah, that's great.
Yes, it was eventually. So it was great, but like, so on the flip side, that was one of the times where it really felt like I was able to pull myself up, because in school I had this habit of like taking a slight dip, whether it was on purpose or not. And I was like, okay, I got to get out of this hole. And that's what motivated me versus like feeling like I was really good and then having to fall. So I got the issues out of the way early, and then I kind of rebounded from there.
So on that note, I believe, if I am correct, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, which I'm sure you will, Emmanuel Quickley had a game last week, and Andrew's going to be mad at me because I'm typing as I'm talking, and he could hear the typing, and he doesn't like that. Didn't he have a game last week where he went 1 for 10, or am I something around there?
He went 1 for 11. The only reason I'm correcting you is because I actually have his stats up anyway, so it's not like I memorized it. So you're good. Okay,
so he went 1 for 11. He's had a couple other. He had a 1 for 10. That's what I was thinking of. He had a 1 for 10 game earlier this year.
Yeah.
He had a 1 for 9 game earlier this year. So he has had some moments like you, Jeremy, where he took that dip, and yet here we are, 27 points, 25 minutes, or was it 25 points in 27 minutes, whatever it is. And the ultimate sign of respect, Bobby Marks pointed out on Twitter. A few people pointed it out in the stream. The Clippers had to stick Kawhi fucking Leonard on this kid at the end of the game. Like, what else do you say, right? What else are we supposed to say? So, I mean, talk about an A+. To me, the conversation at this point isn't even about what Emmanuel Quickley is doing in the games and like dissecting his play, but talking about, I think we need to start talking about, we don't need to get too far into it today, but like what this does for this franchise moving forward. But what are your thoughts?
Well, I'd say my first thought is, and I really like LaMelo Ball, I do, but one thing that stood out to me was last night, LaMelo scored a career high 27 points. He did it against the Bucks. He was efficient. He was
good. I watched some of that game. He was good.
Great. His assist numbers were there, all these things. He really popped. And, I was thinking about how the media made a big deal about it, and rightfully so. Again, this isn't to take away from LaMelo, but then I think about the fact that Emmanuel Quickley in 3 of his last 4 games has had at least 25 points. And it's just astounding because we're talking about LaMelo Ball, who in some ways was a consensus number 1 pick who wound up going to 3. And you have Emmanuel Quickley, who was perceived as a second-round pick, as a reach by some, and he's just absolutely showing. He's popping off. It's incredible. So it's just a joy to watch that, where he can just turn it on in the second half, and it comes out of nowhere, even when the 3-point shot isn't working, right? Because like he went 2 of 8 today.
It wasn't today. He was missing. Yeah.
It was off, but he found other ways to still be an efficient scorer. I mean, 25 points on 16 shots. The thing that stood out to me the most probably was that he missed a free throw. I will say, one thing that I've noticed from watching him is he's got to stop with the jump passes. It's something that personally bothers me a lot. It's like, even when I was in baseball, I was told, like, from some of my earliest memories, are don't throw jump passes.
I could see you doing the Jeter though.
But that's why I did it.
Because you're Jeter. Okay.
Big Jeter fan, so I would do it. And it was like, I would get a ground ball and then I would jump and throw, not like turning a double play type of situation. So for him, especially in the last game against the Cavs, where he would do a jump pass right to Mitch. Mitch is staring right at the basket, and the ball just falls out of his hands and it goes in for a transition. And then actually what happened after that, I believe, was Quickley committed the foul. And then because he didn't want a fast break opportunity, got his 3rd foul. Peyton had to come in, and then Peyton started scoring. So it's like those little things where one turns into another, and it just kind of explodes from there. So, he's learning. You can see the process and the playmaking that's starting to arise from there. And it's just so awesome to see. I don't even really want to call him a microwave scorer off the bench, because it feels like he's doing this on such a macro way.
I think that belittles what he's doing, because the playmaking is coming along. My favorite moment today, and I think I tweeted it out. It was definitely in the first half, where he drove and it was a simple pass, but they were playing the drive well, and he kicked it out to Alec Burks, and Alec Burks made a 3. And that's it's a simple thing. Point guard's got to be able to like drive the lane and hit open 3-point shooters, but we haven't seen Quickley do as much of that early on in the season. And the fact that he's starting to do stuff like that is great. I think we're at the point where doesn't like CJ McCollum now have to be the ceiling that we're expecting? Undersized, not quite a point. Well, but maybe even more of a point guard than CJ McCollum. I don't know. The floater is just so damn good, and I buy the shot. He could defend ones at the very least. I think he could probably defend some twos. Like this is great. So yeah, A plus. Let's give one more good and then one more bad, and then we're going to go to KP. RJ Barrett took on the challenge of going one-on-one against Kawhi Leonard. Kawhi got him a few times, as one of the top 3 players in the NBA is want to do occasionally. But I thought he more than held his own, had a really good game. Seemed like this game was a little bit personal to him and Julius Randle. And it's more and more and more every game on both ends for RJ Barrett. I think we're seeing, it's like I feel like I often read about, like Zach Lowe stands out in my head when he writes about a guy that's been popping over the last like couple weeks or like couple months. And you're like, this is this player making the leap. It feels like we're watching that right now with RJ Barrett.
Yeah. And I mean, Clyde said it best, that RJ opportunity for an all-star game next year. And that's what it really feels like, because if this is his leap in the second season of his NBA career, because I think he's maybe now just about played 82 games or so around there in his career.
Just
something
short.
along those lines. Yeah. Yep. I mean, again, if you're seeing this coming together and this is the second year, and you would hope at least that it's an upward trajectory for at least a few more years, that's a scary thought for the rest of the league.
Oh yeah.
I mean, and he was very efficient today. He scored, I think, 23 points? Yeah, on 14 shots.
At one point, he was, I think, perfect. Until the second half, he was perfect from 2. He had only just missed 2 threes. Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just the 3 where, I think he was like, 0 for 1 tonight? Or today you want him to shoot more threes, but he's doing it in such a masterful way that it doesn't really matter, because the opportunities he's finding for other players as well. And you can just see him, like you're saying, figuring it out. He's becoming an all-around player. Had some nice defense on Kawhi. These are the opportunities that you love to see for a young player. And we've talked before about how, no player on this roster should be untouchable. And I agree with it, but now my thinking is still like, well, honestly, who would I trade for RJ Barrett? That's feasible, right? Because like you could say, oh, well, Luka Doncic, Zion Williamson, all, those types of players, but they're not going to be on the block.
I mean,
so
let's just say the name.
Right.
Say the name. It's Beal. Do you put RJ Barrett in a Beal trade?
No, and I don't. Right. So again, like that's, I guess, in a way, it makes him untouchable for right now. And if that's the context of him being untouchable, I'm totally fine with that, because what he's doing is so impressive. And especially for the exploitation that comes with a rookie scale contract, the value you're getting is so much greater than what he's making right now at around $8 million.
Yeah.
And that's just fantastic moving forward. You've got 2 years to take advantage of that contract. And next year should be a perfect opportunity to do it. And hopefully the year after that. Yeah.
Completely agree. It's coming at both ends too. So that's great. We did hear this week, I just thought of it now, that the Knicks are monitoring the LaVine situation. Zach LaVine, that's a guy who would have been nice to have in there. But again, whereas maybe before the season, well, actually, no, before the season, you wouldn't have traded Barrett for LaVine. But at some point during the season, the way he was going there for a little bit when he was really struggling with his shot, he would have been like, maybe. No, that goes right out the window. I'm going to be really curious to see how they toe the line, because even Steve Jones had a tweet before saying he's going to be really curious to see how Thibodeau balances the development of both Barrett and Quickley at the same time, because they are obviously both guys who are really good with the ball in their hands. And you have Julius Randle here. And if you bring in another guy, again, whether it's a LaVine or an Oladipo or whoever who needs the ball, like, what does that look like? And I we don't obviously have the answer to that question right now, but again, something to consider moving forward. Before we move on to KP, we should mention briefly, Kevin Knox did not get off the bench tonight. We've been talking about this for a month and a half. Who's going to be out of the rotation when they're all healthy? And we got a little bit of a surprise today, because Noel was announced before the game, was going to miss it with a sore groin, I think. So he got the Frank injury. And I figured that meant that we were going to see Obi Toppin as a backup 5, and we were going to see Kevin Knox as a backup 4. And it was not to be. Taj Gibson played backup 5. Toppin got in there. Knox was not to be seen. Does this Are you giving Kevin Knox an incomplete on his progress report, or are you giving him a poor grade right now?
I don't see how you can avoid giving him a poor grade.
That's fair.
I mean, think about Kevin Knox. If he's not a 3-point corner specialist, what is he giving you that's really positive value?
He's been putting the ball on the floor and making adequate decisions.
But is over anyone else? I mean, again,
I'm trying.
Right. The fact that it took you a pause to even like think about what he can do on a constructively is concerning. It just is.
Giving nice effort on the defensive end.
But again, like the last 10 games, he's been atrocious. At best, he's been mediocre.
He's been poor.
Yeah.
He's been poor. Okay, so maybe he gets we'll set up a parent teacher conference with Mr. Knox. If you're listening to this, I love you. I love your son. But if you want to call in, me and Jeremy can talk you through some things you can do at home to help young Kevin work out some of his difficulties. Okay. Anything else before we move on to our not celebration, commemoration of the 2 years of the Kristaps? I mean, listen, but it has a lot to do with what we're talking about. So I think we could just move forward. I
don't know if we're, lighting like a commemoration candle or a birthday candle as a celebration, or what are the candles that are in churches that you light? What are they called? You
light? Look at you. First you call me a wop, and now you're demeaning my religion,
your
my
word,
faith.
not mine.
It's a, oh my God, it's not an Advent candle. You put $1 in the box and you light, it's a red candle.
Right.
And you're supposed to say a prayer for someone that has passed.
Right.
Oh shit.
Well, whatever that is, I don't know if it's that or a birthday candle. It's one of the two, but I think it's closer to a birthday candle, honestly.
What about Hanukkah candle? You guys like Hanukkah candles?
That's once a year.
So we can do this once a year. We can commemorate the KP trade once a year.
Right, but I'm saying there are eight different days. You don't celebrate the KP trade for 8 straight days.
One game for one candle for each healthy game he's played this year.
The oil only lasts so long, John.
Oh,
the oil lasts longer than KP. That is true. Yeah, but
we'll light something on fire. So Dallas. Let's start with Dallas. The Dallas Mavericks, as we sit here, are 8-12. You tweeted out earlier today that they are a game out of being the 4th worst team in the NBA.
Sole possession. Yeah.
Sole possession being the 4th worst team in the NBA. It's not what you want. They've lost 5 games in a row. Doncic came out after the most recent game and said he was happier with their effort. The previous game, he said that I think something to the effect of guys weren't trying or didn't feel like we were trying. The better effort game, the most recent game, notably, did not feature Mr. Porzingis because he sat out because it was the second of a back-to-back, and he is perpetually recovering from an injury that happened 2 years ago.
3 years ago, right?
Holy shit!
Yeah,
happened in February of 2018.
Yeah, almost 3 years.
Okay, so he's
like February 6th.
This was the most recent knee injury. This was the other. Right. This is yes. Okay,
but that is compounded by the fact that he had ACL tear, which the weight distribution and his mobility, and it's all kinetic.
Yes. And here's the thing, and I know you've been gearing up for this, and I want you to have the floor. I want to say 2 really quick things. Dennis Smith Jr. this week, and good for him.
Mm-hmm.
Kudos to him for being. Holy shit! Did you see that?
I heard something fall.
A roll of paper towels just fell off a shelf behind me.
It's Dennis Smith Jr. saying thank you.
Do you think? Or do you think it's the ghost of Dennis Smith Jr. It was like, don't talk about me?
It's possible.
Anyway, wow. That was scary. So Dennis Smith, I swear I'm not making this up. It's right there.
I heard it.
So Dennis Smith Jr., big of him, going to the G League. It's what you want from Dennis Smith Jr. after we've seen him over the last year and change. It's not what you want from the one player that is still here from the Porzingis trade. So that's out there. And the other thing I want to say is, to everybody being like, oh, this trade was a home run for the Knicks and it's the greatest trade in the history of trades. I will never, ever, ever, ever change my opinion on two things. One, it was shitty process to bank on something happening that was not a certainty. And people will listen to that and be like, you're an idiot. KD was coming if the injury didn't happen. And that's fine. We have a difference of opinion. I don't believe that. You do. It's okay. We don't have to say anything else about it. And the second thing that you'll never get me able to change my opinion on is I would have loved to see what else was out there if they did not prioritize dumping. And I've seen the tree. I think Benchwarmer made it up and it's totally valid. That said, you could have just kept Tim Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee on the books. It's $30 million. You didn't need that money to sign Marcus Morris or Julius Randle. Marcus Morris turned into the pick that turned into Manuel Quickley. There was another path forward. And it'll always make me wonder, was there a trade out there where we could have gotten picks and a better young player? If you're waiting for me to sit here and be like, greatest trade in the history of trades, I still can't do that. But boy, is this a different conversation than we would have been having had most of the last 2 years. So Jeremy, with that, and feel free to call me out because I know my opinions are not shared by most, but I just wanted to preface the conversation with that, and I will turn it over to you.
Well, I'd say that your second point, the way you phrased it is the right way to think about it. We don't know what was out there. We really don't. It'd be nice to know if we did. It's more when I read or hear people saying like they could have gotten a better offer. We don't have the information to go off of that. And also, if you actually go back to 2019 when he was traded and canvass the league, you're looking at a 7'3" player coming off of a torn ACL who had yet to play that year, who is in line for a huge payday, who was facing at the time a pretty serious allegation, whatever it may be in terms of the whether it was true or not, but that was the case at the time.
It was
package all of that together, shop it around the league. That's not the most enticing of packages. It just isn't. It's very possible that we as fans overvalue the players that are ours because they're ours. We are possessive of them. We want to make them worth more than they are. I would love to know what other offers are out there. Absolutely. And I think that if you swap out even Dennis Smith Jr. for like Jalen Brunson, you're looking at this very differently.
Oh, can we have Jalen? Can we do it over again?
I would love that. And you know that because, Leon Rose's first client was Rick Brunson, Jalen Brunson's father. So, it's that sort of thinking where, again, you can't just say, oh, well, this is the trade. And I wish that they had taken this offer, that offer, because we don't know. But I do think the other thing is that a lot of people tend to say like, oh, well, like Emmanuel Quickley is not part of the Kristaps Porzingis trade or one thing or another because they still would have had money left over. Listen, the Kristaps Porzingis trade changed everything. The entire complexity of the team. You've got one path that's with Kristaps Porzingis and one path without. Any moves that you make after you trade Kristaps Porzingis are interlinked. They're intertwined with the trade, directly or indirectly. They are a catalyst. Or they are a result of what happened. And so, you could keep Kristaps Porzingis, and chances are, I believe that if Kristaps Porzingis stayed, hadn't been traded yet, the Knicks still would have found a way after missing out on KD and Kyrie or whatever to go after someone like Julius Randle, because it always seemed to make sense to have pairing Randle and Porzingis. There was a lot of scuttlebutt about the idea of pairing them together, and we know that Mills and Perry went with him. And you can think about them together, but what else is there? I don't know. Again, you just have to look at the fact that there are two different scenarios. It's not just the KP trade and what came of it. It's everything else.
You can't analyze it in a vacuum.
Exactly. It's the entire offseason. And the truth is that we really don't know what a path with Kristaps Porzingis and the leftover cap space would have looked like.
You're 100% right.
We know what the trade and the subsequent things that follow do look like. And, the one thing, the most important thing that we talk about is the best ability is availability. It's true. Over the last 3 seasons, right? Julius Randle played 73 games for the Pelicans, missed 9. Last season, he played 64 games for the Knicks, missed 1. Only reason he missed it was to attend his grandmother's funeral.
Oh, that's right.
This year has played 21 games. Porzingis, the season that Julius Randle missed 9 games, Porzingis missed all 82. Last season, he played 57 out of 65 regular season games, missed 8. and then missed 3 out of 6 playoff games because he hurt his MCL. And then this season, he's played 9 of 20 possible Mavs games. That's a lot of money invested. And my big thing with the Mavs is this. I have no problem with them taking a shot at Luka Doncic because that was the right call. If you can trade your own picks for a player like Luka Doncic, totally fine.
Yeah.
The issue is when you don't play with house money, you could get in a really precarious situation like the one the Mavs are finding them in. And that's the difference between where the Knicks are at right now and where the Mavs were, because the Knicks can afford to play with house money because they have the Mavs picks. The Mavs traded from their own bank. And this, we talk about Bradley Beal and maybe even Zach LaVine, and we'll get to Porzingis in a moment. But when I see everything about Beal, for example, it reminds me so much of the Kyrie Irving situation when
in Boston.
Well, when he was in Cleveland.
Oh, when he was in Cleveland. Sorry. Yeah.
And the idea was like, well, we've got Kristaps Porzingis. We could trade for him and we figure it out. And my philosophy was like, no, because you're talking about the margin of error for messing up is razor thin if you do that.
Yep.
And of course he went to Boston. It didn't even work out there, but Boston traded the Nets picks. They traded they didn't trade their own assets. They traded Brooklyn's picks for Kyrie.
Because they had
Irving.
A surplus.
And they had a better team on paper and in reality with Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Al Horford. They had a complete team where they were like, we think Kyrie is the missing piece for us to go. Turns out that wasn't the case, but the gamble was worth it because they could afford to do that.
And I think Danny Ainge would make that gamble. And I say that knowing that Colin Sexton was that pick, and Colin Sexton looks like he's going to be just an all-star. He's going to be a multi-time all-star.
He's been playing exceptionally well. So again, like the thing about the Mavs too is like you look at this trade and so many people as well have been saying like, well, no matter what, it was still a bad trade. Who could expect that the Mavs would be like this? It's like, well, obviously not. You don't project it, but if your idea is like, well, they're only going to get late first round picks in return for trading Porzingis, and now everything changes because you thought wrong, then that doesn't mean that the trade is suddenly but. Again, it's also possible that both these teams can win a trade. It's not like the Knicks win it or the Mavs win it. Both can be successful. Both can lose it too. But again, like this is how I felt from the day the Knicks traded Porzingis. It's okay to take a player who's going to make a lot of money, who you have durability concerns with, where basically right now Porzingis' only advantage in the NBA is that he's tall, and try to use that as a winning piece and take those assets, diversify your portfolio, and when the time is right, strike for something that you really want. And the Knicks are in prime position to do that. And I'm just really excited about that.
And thank you. You did. I was waiting all week for this, and you didn't disappoint. Because I know you give this stuff a ton of thought, and you deserve credit for that. Because these are not off the cuff remarks. It's why when we talk about trading for Lonzo Ball or trading for Victor Oladipo, you're not trading for Lonzo Ball or Victor Oladipo. You're trading for the right to pay Lonzo Ball his next contract. You're trading for the right to potentially give Victor Oladipo his 5th year. And we could talk about the wisdom of those things in a separate conversation, and we probably will. But the Knicks, the Mavericks were paying for the right to give Kristaps Porzingis a max contract. And I think that is one part of the conversation. I guess you could argue it is the most important part of the conversation. And you said I know you've done it too. I've canvassed the league back then, and the two things that have always made me wonder are Bagley in Sacramento and SGA in LA. Now with Oklahoma City. And I think it's fair to assume that given the Clippers offseason plans and the fact that they succeeded in executing those plans, maybe they weren't dying to have Kristaps Porzingis and his, what was the cap hold? Was it 17 million or 20? His cap hold, it was 17 million. Okay. Maybe they weren't dying to have that on the books. And if the Knicks had traded for Marvin Bagley, again, just for argument's sake, something tells me they wouldn't have gotten 2 first-round picks from the Kings. Something tells me it would have been more like Bagley and 1 protected first. And how would we be feeling right now? And I guess the only other 2 things I think are worth adding, because this is just so multi-layered, this conversation. And that's why I don't like to talk about it on Twitter, because it's not a conversation you could have into a
It's too small. You've one tweet and then everyone either reads into it differently, and before you know, it's like I have a thread here, but no one really cares. And it has to be spoken. It can't be written out. And
this is kind of funny, but like, could the Knicks maybe use a guy like Tim Hardaway Jr. on their team right now in the right role, third, fourth option? Maybe a little bit. That said, I don't terribly miss him. So, but that's more of a devil's advocate point that I just wanted to throw in there. And then what was the other one? Oh yeah, the Mavericks. I mean, we're all dancing on their grave right now. They're not going to be what's their winning percentage? 40%. They're not going to be a 400 team the rest of the year. They're going to win more games, and that's fine. But the fact that they have even put themselves in this hole and opened up the door to the possibility that this is a lottery pick, like, my goodness, that's why you do a trade like this. And then there's so many other layers to it. Like, this trade got Steve Mills fired.
Yep.
So if you want to talk from a Knicks fan perspective, if you're analyzing the trade from 18 different ways, the only one that you really care about is that Leon Rose is in this job right now, right? Because Steve Mills made this trade. So
I've got one more for you.
Please.
If the Knicks don't trade away Tim Hardaway Jr. and they keep him on the team, it's possible that they win enough games where they get out of range for the top 5 pick, where a guarantee of getting a top 5 pick. It was a really good top 5 this in that draft class. Obviously, you have Zion, who's elite. You've got Ja, who's elite. You've got RJ, who's progressing very well. DeAndre Hunter is taking a significant step forward. Garland's been injured, but he played pretty nicely against the Knicks, and he's putting games together. What happens if you fall like the Timberwolves, the Suns, who fell from 3rd to 6th, and then the Timberwolves traded up from 11 to 6 and got Jarrett Culver? What happens if the Knicks wind up with Jarrett Culver instead? And they have Tim Hardaway Jr.'s contract still in the books.
Fuck that. Imagine if they didn't draft RJ Barrett.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, is that in that draft class, there's a chance that they fall below where they don't get a top 3 pick. And that's a problem. And now we're seeing the fruits of that awful season, developing right before our very eyes. Yep. And to think that Kristaps Porzingis could have been the reason, because not trading him and then having to pay him and still having Hardaway Jr. and Courtney Lee on the books and trying to figure things out like that, that's just a recipe for a mediocre team. It was the best opportunity that they could have had. And right now, I mean, again, we want the Knicks to do well, but as I'm looking at Tankathon, they're sitting 11th from the top. The Mavs are tied for 8th. The Knicks are 3.5 back of the worst record. I mean, they're a game away from being tied for the 4th worst record. Like, again, it doesn't take a whole lot to just get there. And the West is really competitive. Yeah. So the bottom line is, if you can walk away with 2 top, let's say 16 picks, that's a great position to be in. But and later, I'm sure we're going to talk about this. The idea of like the Knicks have a league average net rating. So we know that they are a legit medium good team, or average team, if you will.
They're not a bad team.
No,
Austin Rivers, whatever it was, the 4th, 5th, 6th game of the season. I've been on bad teams before. Right. This is not that.
Right. And later we will get into the idea, I'm sure, of like, well, what happens if the Knicks just say like, well, we're still going to try for the 12th, for the play-in game and getting 10th. But like, what happens if we finish a few games out of it and we're also like in range for a top 5 pick, and we know that next year we can absolutely go for it and become that play-in team? And
well, we'll
let the things fall as they will. But it's just, to me, it's a fascinating thing to think about, because with Porzingis, the whole mindset was like, the reason the Knicks didn't do better in the 2018 draft was because they wanted to build around Porzingis, and they brought in Tim Hardaway Jr.
And they started 16 and 13.
Right. And they had other players that were good enough to get them up there. Porzingis goes down. I think the Knicks had the 2nd worst record in the NBA from that point to the end of the season, just behind the Suns. So again, it's this idea of like, you can't really take any steps back with Porzingis in that situation, because you're committed to it.
I think what you need to ask yourself as so like back then, again, they were 16 and 13. It looked pretty good. It didn't feel like this. This feels like there has been an organizational reset, that someone literally hit the reset button on the entire franchise. in terms of how they think, in terms of how they prepare, in terms of how they see themselves, in terms of do they still see themselves as losers? Because I still think even then, like it was like, when's the other shoe going to drop? As opposed to now, it feels more like, how can we take the next step? Which on the surface runs counter to the scenario that you just posited. But I don't necessarily know if that's the case. And the only other thing I want to say about Porzingis, and then we'll move on from that son of a bitch, is the day after the trade, I wrote something, or maybe it was a few days after the trade, whatever it was. And I essentially said, here's why you trade him. Because everybody who criticized the trade at the time, they had one thing in common, which is that the Knicks cannot get out of their own way. Their organization is a disaster. And now they trade their best player. He was butting heads with the team at the time, right? With the organization, with the front office, the whole thing. Like, how would you have ever hoped to recover in a real, genuine way with someone there who thought that little of everything that went on inside the walls of Madison Square Garden? And yeah, you could say, well, they could have fired everybody like the Knicks ended up doing. I don't know. I don't know if that kind of level of stink that he thinks that he thought of this team at the time ever really wears off. To me, if you're going to have a culture reset, you got to, again, you really truly have to have a reset, which is, I think, what they did this offseason. So that's the only other thing I wanted to say to what you're bringing up. And this is a good place to kind of bring us home is, how do you toe this line? Because now you've embraced winning, right? You've embraced, like, we are going to go out to try to win every game. Can you still do that? And then with 15 or so games to go, be like, all right, Julius, you're going to take a seat. Who else? Alec, you're going to take a seat or maybe play for a different team. Well, like, what do you do there?
So I just want to be clear. I mean, and you know this, but front offices can take a step back. The coaches and the team itself, the roster players, they don't.
No.
The goal here is still like, we're going to win. Obviously, everyone's aware of the situation. But I think
coaches don't tank, players don't tank, front offices tank.
Right. But I like, that's the thing. I wouldn't even call it tanking in this situation. I know you're absolutely right. But it's this idea of, especially with the play-in tournament, that it's like, okay, well, maybe we're 5 games away from the 8th seed, but we're only 3 games away from the 10th seed, for example. Like, that's a difference we can make up. And so having that play-in tournament, this is why the NBA created it, to avoid tanking. So teams can say, like, we're close enough to get there where we can really do something. And I guess the question is, because realistically, I mean, like, I don't see how much the Knicks can sell anyway. Like, even if they were sellers, it's what? We're talking maybe Alec Burks, maybe Nerlens Noel.
We're not talking about Randall. We're just talking about the other guys.
Right.
And
it's more the ancillary pieces. I mean, like, again, and we'll probably have this discussion too. Like, what do the Knicks do in the idea of, like, with Mitchell Robinson? We will broach that again. Like, it's just something that we have to talk about. Yeah. So the idea of, like, outside of that, I mean, like, Randall's not going anywhere. Like you said, RJ is not going anywhere. Quickley sure as hell isn't. And Obi Toppin's not going to go anywhere. So the idea of, like, well, if you're still, like, if you're in 11th place or 10th place, right? Even if you trade some of your best players and just kind of, like, try to hoard assets and then consolidate them in some exciting way, you're still within the opportunity of being able to make a play-in tournament for playoff basketball. That doesn't go away. And it's the margin is so close, right? I mean, like, just looking at it right now, the Knicks are in 9th, Orlando's in 10th. Orlando's a half game back of the Knicks in 10th. And then right after that, you've got Orlando tied with Chicago. Mm-hmm. You've got Miami a half game back of Chicago. And you've got Toronto tied with Miami. So again, like, it's just one game that could be the difference.
Yeah. And Toronto, I mean,
Toronto's much better than their. Well,
all due respect to Tom Thibodeau and what he and the Knicks have been able to achieve this year. They're not a better team than the Raptors. They're not a better team than the Heat.
On paper, absolutely. I agree.
You want to tell me that the Cavs are going to fall back down to earth? You want to tell me that the Hornets are going to fall back down to earth? You want to tell me even maybe that Atlanta takes a step back?
Right.
But I'll believe all of that.
There's enough parity here where the Knicks could hypothetically take a step back without even taking a significant step back on the court.
Yes.
And that is something I think that really needs to be examined by the team, because sure, it's not about this year. It never has been. It may not even be about next year, But the idea here is that you can still have your cake and eat it too by trying to play competitive basketball until the very end of the season where you have a chance of getting into the playoffs in some capacity versus like just taking yourself out and watching yourself spiral. That's not going to happen. It's not going to be the second option. They're still going to be within range. And that to me is the most ideal situation should they decide, like, well, let's consider the long-term aspects here too. If they try to say, we love where we're at, we're going to stay put. All we're going to do is try to take on money and some sort of salary dump with a 3-team trade. I can live with that as well. There's so many opportunities that are out there, which is really exciting. But it's just a matter of like, and this is where the Knicks have played 21 games right now. I think they've got 37 this year. The first half. 16 left or so? 35?
36.
Okay. So
they have 15 games left. Then is the quote unquote all-star break. And then after that, they'll
probably have a few games and then it'll be the trade deadline, March 25th. So it's going to be a lot of fun. But again, like all of this is related to Porzingis because you know that the idea of taking a step back would not be considered. It would not be a possibility.
I don't, again, he was not on the same page as the organization. So the idea that you were doing anything with him where he was on the same page legitimately is what you were trying to do. He wasn't
good enough to stay, to overstay that of a front office.
No.
Like if there's going to be turnover, Joel Embiid is a superstar, right? Daryl Morey is not going to trade Joel Embiid. If it came to a situation where Leon Rose comes in and Kristaps Porzingis is there, he's going to want to have his own fingerprints all over the organization. Yeah. He's probably not going to say like, I'm going to keep Kristaps Porzingis because he's going to want to mold his own team.
I predict. So here's the thing about the league right now. There's only 3 again, tanking's a bad word because these teams are still trying to win.
They're tiers.
Allegedly. There are 3 shithole teams. You like that? Is that a good description of the bottom tier?
Yes.
Apologies. I know we do have parents that listen that apparently occasionally put this on in front of their children. So I will try to monitor my language.
Let them learn at a young age.
3 poopy hole teams, Minnesota, Washington, and Detroit. Those teams do not appear to be going anywhere. Although it wouldn't shock me if the Pistons made a little run because Dwayne Casey is a good coach. Although, okay, let's just put those in their own bucket. After that, the bottom of the league looks like this. New Orleans, Dallas, Sacramento, Oklahoma City, Houston, who's been great since they traded Harden, by the way, Miami, Toronto, Chicago, Orlando, the Knicks, Hornets, Cavs. I don't see the obvious team in that group that's like, oh yeah, they're definitely going to be the 4th worst team when all is said and done, or that they're definitely going to be the 5th worst team when all is said and done. So I think the Knicks are going to be pretty easily able to like fight hard for the playoffs, or the play-in, whatever you want to say it, the whole way through. And if I had to guess, because I feel like too often we have these discussions in like a binary way where it's like, okay, either you're tanking and you're selling off assets for whatever you can get, or you're making a push to win, full on. I think the Knicks are, and I've kind of been echoing this sentiment for a while. I think the Knicks are going to try to toe the line. I think they're going to try to use their cap space for their advantage. I do not think that they are going to sacrifice any significant future assets. What defines a significant future asset? Again, I'll repeat myself. The 2 ones that are on that dividing line to me are Kevin Knox on the player side and the 2023 Dallas pick on the asset side. And do they put either of those items on the table? I don't know. But in terms of everything else, utilizing cap space, Frank Ntilikina, Dennis Smith Jr., 2nd round picks, like I think all that stuff's going to be on the table in an effort to get better, not only this season, but moving forward, or potentially moving forward, which could mean trading for an expiring contract, but with the understanding like, yeah, we're trading for an expiring contract, but because we want to re-sign this person in the offseason. That's what I think they'll do when push comes to shove.
I think you made a great point, though, and it shouldn't be overlooked, where, yes, we talk about the idea of buying and selling, but it's also the Knicks could do both, hypothetically. They don't just have to trade off players for picks. They could try to trade one young player for another young player and try to just, change up the positionality of what's going on. They don't necessarily have to be like taking a step back. They could try to do both buying and selling and just be where they're at. And if they're at a net neutral in terms of assets from where they started, then that's not the worst thing. because it really depends on what asset you've then taken in, and especially from a salary perspective. I mean, we talked. There's some conversations about JJ Redick and the idea of where he's from Brooklyn.
I must have missed Brooklyn. Allow me to peruse Twitter while you're talking. Was there an official report that like they were looking to move him?
Shams, I believe, had written an article saying that the Pelicans were thinking about moving
him in Ball, that article. Okay.
Right, but there was a new one today or yesterday.
Okay. So that I missed.
Yeah. The idea of sending JJ Redick to the Sixers, the Nets, or there's a third team.
Well, I'm looking it up because you're
Sixers, Nets, or Celtics. And if you're looking at the assets that those teams have, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense, right? The Nets don't really have the contracts to match, and why would they want JJ Redick? He doesn't fill a need.
I see.
The idea of Danny Green could go, but again, like I think Danny Green's a better player right now than JJ Redick is. You could probably cobble some other salaries together, make something work. Who knows? The Celtics, it's a tough situation for him to be in that. But like, I wouldn't want the Knicks to trade for JJ Redick, but I could understand if they were somehow involved where not as buyers, but a 3-team deal. Again, like I don't know how in demand JJ Redick in his worst season is.
What does Mr. Redick make?
He makes $13 million.
Does he now?
Yeah.
That's
a lot. That's a lot for, an older player, because a team like the Sixers, right? They need salary. If they don't have future salary, they can't make trades more easily. And that's why, because like their bigger contracts are Joel Embiid, Ben Simmons, Tobias Harris, and then they've got like Seth Curry. So if Danny Green walks at the end of the year, for example, they don't have salary that they could just easily use to make an upgrade that they want.
Yeah. Yeah, I think.
And JJ Redick doesn't help them with that because he's also expiring.
So I will. I was going to save this for the newsletter, but I'll echo it now. I was told the Knicks are looking to get involved, and I think I actually may have mentioned this. I forget what I write in the damn newsletter. I apologize. The Knicks are keeping tabs not only on certain players, but they're looking to get involved potentially as a third team. As they should, and that's that's not. I shouldn't act like that's breaking news because it's obvious. Any idiot could figure that out. So you're listening to this idiot right now. So congratulations to you. Anyway, but like but there's again the idea of like using your money, using your cap space to take on like a bad player or a tough situation where a team has a good player that they like and that other people would like too, but they just need to move him somewhere. And the team that they're trying to make the deal with doesn't value that player as much, or would rather have like the cap relief, or would rather have a pick, or would rather have whatever. And then they need a home. So it's essentially, and in that sort of situation, you may have the Knicks giving up a small asset to take that player into their cap. So it's not a cap dump in this traditional sense, because they are giving an asset as opposed to getting an asset for taking the player, but you're getting a good player at a cheaper cost in assets than you otherwise would be able to. And that's what I think the Knicks are looking to try to do.
Yeah,
so
exactly. We'll
see if they can pull it. I mean, and look, we got the right guy behind the, you are actually Brock Aller since nobody's ever seen him.
It's true.
And I'm sorry to break that news here, but
it's about time I had my deep throat moment. For people who don't understand that analogy, read a book.
Don't say anything. Just no.
Because
leave it.
Otherwise, it's just
leave it for the kids. No, just leave it for the kids.
I'm already regretting saying it, but that's US history.
No, there are no. This is no regrets.
No regrets.
This is a no regret podcast.
I feel like if we didn't at least touch upon Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine just a smidge,
sure,
doing ourselves a disservice.
All right. As hold on, this is live podcasting. When's the salmon gonna be ready, babe? I'll put that sucker in. We could get this done in 15 minutes. Okay. We're having salmon tonight. Very delicious. Air fryer.
Ooh. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. We got to talk because I need to buy an air fryer. I'm convinced.
It'll change your life.
Yeah.
This is what the people came to hear.
Air fryers and salmon.
And
deep throat.
and the ghost of Dennis Smith Jr.
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk about Beal first because I wrote about him a little bit for the newsletter. I don't see the world where the risk is worth it. Because if you're okay, there's two paths I could see the Knicks going to potentially acquire him. A path where they're like, no, we're going to keep Julius Randle, RJ Barrett, and Emmanuel Quickley. We want to add Beal to that core, in which case you're giving up a whole lot of picks. We don't need to talk about specifically what the picks are, but it's a lot of picks. And I'm sure those picks will carry with them real downside risk if Beal were to leave, and potentially even if Beal stayed. Maybe, although I doubt the latter, because if he stayed, then you'd have at the very least a good, competent, like mid-tier playoff team that maybe has a world where they get to something else. Okay, that's path one. The other path is, well, shit, we got this kid Quickley now. Yeah, sure, maybe we'll give you Quickley for Bradley Beal. You're not getting much else. And try to parlay him into your star. It'll take a pick or two in addition, but maybe the protections change, or maybe like it's swap instead, whatever. I don't know if either of those paths is one I want to walk down right now, considering Beal is not making you a contender this year, and he's in all certainty, likelihood, whatever, going to make you a contender next year. What am I not seeing here? Are you on a different path here?
No, I'm on the same path with you. The thing that I'm most interested in Bradley Beal is what the trade will look like, because I want to see what precedent he sets in terms of trading for a top scorer of his magnitude. Because let's face it, I don't see Bradley Beal, as good as he is, and he is very good, especially in the offensive end.
I know where you're going with this.
I don't see him being added to this team helping him. It feels too early. And so, look, I mean, I will believe it when it happens, or rather, let me start over. I strongly believe that in 2023, the reasons why the Knicks are loading up on future assets is to make a run at Devin Booker. I just do. It makes a ton of sense when you think about all of the factors. And if you focus on Bradley Beal now instead, he's 27 years old. That's not ancient by basketball standards at all. But you also have to consider the fact that RJ Barrett's still only 20 years old. Emmanuel Quickley is 20 years old.
21.
21. Thank you.
He could drink.
That's true.
Probably having a cocktail right now, actually.
I'd hope so.
I hope so too.
These picks, they're valuable, but there's also a chance that these picks become more valuable with the players. They could, the value could dip there too. But this idea of it takes a long time for good young players to become great. It doesn't take a couple of years. It takes guys when they're in their 5th, 6th, 7th seasons to really take that leap. I mean, think about it like this, right? Kawhi Leonard, an elite player at one point, maybe a season or so ago, could have a claim as the best player in the NBA. And he thrived for that championship Spurs team.
He sure looks like the best player in the NBA today.
Yeah, well, absolutely he did. But for that Spurs team, for example, he played a supporting role that he dominated. And then he took a step forward. And he dominated, I think, in even year 3, year 4. And then he just got better from there. And it's this idea of RJ is really good right now, if you consider everything. But if he can still take that leap, and he just needs a few more years. Well, and the timing doesn't overlap for me. That's the biggest problem with Beal. You're a couple years too short in terms of the overlap. And I also don't think that, again, as good as Bradley Beal is, that he is a difference maker for that team. There is no legitimate alpha. There's no guy on this roster that in the next 3 to 4 years, if you include Bradley Beal to that I think becomes a top 10 player. Because if you don't have a top 10 player, then you're in trouble. Maybe RJ, 4 to 5 years from now, that helps him. But, you don't want RJ to be that guy right away, because he might not be able to be that guy right away. And that's okay, because he's got time. It just doesn't marinate as long as you want it to. And that's why my eyes are more geared towards 2023, where, again, you can be whatever you want this year. Next year, you make the play-in tournament.
Yeah.
The year after, you are in the playoffs, no play-in tournament, full stop. You are showing clear-cut progression.
I think
then you've got all these assets that you can trade.
I think they're making the playoffs next year.
It's very possible. This year?
Next year. I think they're going to make the playoffs next year. Maybe the play-in tournament this year. Definitely playoffs next year. Here's the thing I want to say. I think we as fans, and I do this all the time because I write about team building a lot because I'm as interested in it as you. We get so caught up in the, okay, well, if you make this move, this is your ceiling, right? That's not always the case because you don't know when you're going to be able to trade a DeMar DeRozan for a Kawhi Leonard, right? Or you don't know when you're going to be able to parlay a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander into a Paul George because Kawhi Leonard wants to sign with you. Or you don't know when you're going to be like, there's, especially in a major market like New York, like there's always another move to make. And so like, I want to acknowledge that at least me saying that I don't think it's the right move to trade for Bradley Beal is not because it's like, okay, so you trade for Bradley Beal and then what do you have? You have a spunky 50. That's not it. It's about, again, taking things one step at a time. And I'm not going to repeat it. You said it really well. And to your point about it takes players time to progress. I'm going to do the thing that it's never wise to do, but fuck it, I'm going to do it anyway. Bradley Beal, rookie year, per 36 minutes, 16 points, 4.4 rebounds, 2.8 assists, 38% from three, 41% from the field. Emmanuel Quickley, rookie year, per 36 minutes, 22.5, 4.1 rebounds, 4.9 assists, 38% from three, just under 40% from the field. So I don't know, just throwing it out there. Like you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. And I think the one logical argument that you could say is like, well, you get Bradley Beal, obviously depends on the cost. You got Beal, RJ, and Randall. Maybe you still have Quickley, but again, the the Wizards would love a player like Quickley in picks.
By the way, that's what I think is going to wind up with Bradley Beal.
It would take a lot to get him. And other teams like the Pelicans, I think they have so many assets at their disposal and they need shooting and they're starting to click. Like they are a team that could conceivably blow the Knicks out of the water to the point where Knicks could afford it, but it would really hurt them in the long run. But let's suppose that the Knicks did get Beal. You're looking at Beal, RJ, and Randall, and then you re-sign Randall. And then maybe you re-sign Mitch for all you know. But you could then try to figure out a way to get that elite player, that top 10 player. But how are you going to do that? Because in free agency, there's none this upcoming year because I don't think Kawhi's leaving. In 2022, again, like there's really no one. It basically means that in 2023, you have no choice but to go all in on like Embiid or
you make
Jokic.
it. I was about to say you make a trade. You trade for Embiid. You trade for Cat.
If you trade for one of those guys and it doesn't pay off because now you've like with the Beal trade, you've traded a lot of your picks in the near future.
You box yourself into a corner. Right. That's what you do.
Okay. You are capping your ceiling.
Yes.
Right. So like even if it's Cat, for example, and you're rolling with RJ, Cat, and Beal. As crazy as that is, and it's not going to happen. But the point here is that you are now limited to that ceiling because you've just traded your future picks for Cat. And you are actually in a very similar situation to the Mavericks in the sense that you've got a better team than the Mavericks have right now, but you are all in on this core. And it also reminds me in some ways
full circle.
Exactly. And
this is not your first rodeo.
It is most certainly not. In some ways, it also reminds me of the Melo years, which was like, again, the Knicks could have probably made more adjustments, but they also that was their team. That was the highest they were going to go. And, I'm sorry. I aspire to have something a little bit higher than the Melo years.
You don't take the cake out early because you're hungry. You leave it in.
Exactly.
Sometimes you do if there's some outside force that's an incentive to do it. And let's be realistic. Sometimes that outside force is a GM making moves for his job. Mm-hmm. We have the luxury of, we know that Leon Rose does not have to. Leon Rose, by the hire of Tom Thibodeau and what this team has done already, he's bought himself, I don't know how much runway, but he's bought himself some runway. And that is absolutely, that matters. I was
thinking about this as well. Like the biggest thing with the Knicks, yes, it was the losing, but you also talk about Dolan in a lot of ways where people would be concerned because when things went well, Dolan still found a way to make things messy. Like the Rockets game last year, when they won in Leon Rose's first game there. And then you have the Spike Lee, literally, like Spike Gate with the actual entrance, the gate of entering. It's like, one thing after another. And I think
Spike Gate.
Spike Gate. And the one thing about not having fans in the building and the one thing about Dolan just being so far removed is you've removed any trace of a PR fiasco because he's just not in the spotlight. And that makes the Knicks look so much better because there, like right now, there are no distractions. There's no issue of like, oh my God, what is the biggest problem? Like we've said, the biggest thing we've talked about has been Alfred Payton starting over Emmanuel Quickley. And yet Emmanuel Quickley is playing more minutes than Alfred Payton, and he's closing down the stretch. And that's totally fine. And, so you try to think about that, and that is a tremendous runway to work with. Absolutely. So again, like it's this idea of waiting just a little bit. You don't have to go all in and splurge. You can take these steps. They don't have to be big leaps. And that's just a really awesome place to be. And I can't emphasize enough how happy I am that we can watch competitive basketball and say like, this is where the Knicks are at in terms of the assets. And I guess the one thing I'll say in regards to Zach LaVine is I like Zach LaVine in theory a lot more than I like Zach LaVine in reality. I was more interested in him. I looked at the on-off splits that he has with cleaning the glass. Let me put it this way. They're ugly. They really are. The one thing is that on the defensive end where he's been a train wreck, his best year was when he was just average, was when he played under Tom Thibodeau. And his offense, he's gotten better. Yep. It's still murky. It's not great.
He's one of the I'm going to throw this out there. I think he's one of the 10 best shot makers in the league. And that's damning praise, because a lot of those shots are because he knows he's one of the 10 best shot makers in the league. Right. And he takes some shots that he probably should. The percentages are there. The efficiency, and you cannot look at Zach LaVine's numbers and be like, oh no, he's a bad. The efficiency's there. There's no argument looking at the numbers.
But that to me is the difference as well, or one of the bigger differences between Bradley Beal and Zach LaVine, because Bradley Beal is an elite player on a terrible team, and Zach LaVine is a really good player on a bad team. But if you take Bradley Beal off the Wizards, they're atrocious. If you take Zach LaVine off the Bulls, are we sure that they are that bad? I don't think we are.
I think they're worse.
But they're not incrementally or expansively worse than they would be without him potentially. And that's again the concern I have. Where is it fool's gold? Or what are you getting with Zach?
That's why you hire I've said this before on this podcast. That's why you hire a Tom Thibodeau. So you get a quote unquote distressed asset like LaVine, and I understand that calling a guy who may very well make an all-star team this year a distressed asset may seem silly, but if you believe there is a world where Zach LaVine can go from borderline all-star to, holy shit, this guy's leading the league in scoring efficiently for a winning team, then you can argue that right now he's a distressed asset in terms of what his value could be. I don't know that is his real potential ceiling value, and that's why we have to trust the people making the decisions for the New York Knicks. Do you make that play? Personally, given how he started this year out and given what I imagine it would cost to get him, I'm not going to be in the LaVine market. It sounds like neither are you.
Nope.
We talked about Beal, Oladipo, who knows? We'll see. Those are the three guys that and then we talk about, again, the type of trade that we've mentioned before, where the Knicks are acquiring a good player for, a cheaper cost in assets, which I think that's the route they're going to go. We'll see. All right. I think we did this one justice. We lit the candle. The paper towels fell. What else?
We talked about Deep Throat.
You talked about Deep Throat.
Now you did too. So
I said deep.
Gotcha there. Said it twice.
I'm not going to say it a third time. Gosh, where are we? We're almost 300 episodes in, and I don't even know where we are. We're in the wilderness finding our way. Jeremy Cohen, thank you. Anything to plug or promote before we get out of here? Merciful.
Actually, there's one thing we got to do.
What do we have to do?
We got to talk about the schedule.
Oh, shit. Okay.
And I should, tip my hat to you. I shouldn't have gone with 0 for 3 this past week. That was on me, but I applaud you for taking 1 to 2. 1 and 2. That was a well done. Well, capitalized on my error.
Oh shit. We have to do the next 10 games too.
Well, I feel like we should. Do you want to count the Clippers game as within the scope of the 10? Cause that was game 21 to 30, or do we want to just write it off? Because I think we both would have picked this as a loss anyway. It was a competitive loss, but a loss nonetheless. So
let's pick the next 10.
Sure.
Okay. So this week I'll read off both. So this week, where the hell are we? I'm looking at the schedule and I'm like, what day are we on? Okay, this week, today at Chicago, Wednesday at Chicago. Thanks to NBA 2021. Saturday, Portland at home. Sunday, Portland at home. So that's the next week.
Miami at home.
Miami at home. Sorry, we're not playing Portland 2 in a row at home. Okay, those are the next 4. Next 6 after that, at Miami, at Washington, Houston home, Atlanta home, at Orlando, San Antonio home. And then do one more, and Minnesota.
No, that's 10.
That's it. Okay. So first things first. Next 4. At Chicago, Portland home, Miami home. 2-2.
All right. I was thinking 2-2, so I'll be the pessimist again and go 1-3.
How dare you host this podcast?
But I think I get dibs on the 10s.
Yeah, I was about to say you go first. Okay, so one more time, very quickly. At Chicago, Portland home, Miami home, at Miami, at Washington, Houston home, Atlanta home, at Orlando, San Antonio home. So 5 home, 5 road. No gimmies.
No.
But even Washington, because Beal's still there. No gimmies, but no like, oh, they're going to lose this game.
Yeah,
Interesting.
I think this is going to be a 5-5. It'll be like a very clean 5-5. I would almost maybe even say 6-4. But Miami is a weird team because you got Jimmy Butler back. You have to think that 4 games from now we're going to start seeing Jimmy get back into form. I mean,
he looked pretty good. The other
30 points last night.
So I was about to say he scored 30 last night.
Right, and that's like thin Jimmy Butler who's lost 12 pounds. So he's going to be in the weight room.
Has he lost 12 pounds?
I think that's what I saw. Yeah.
Holy shit!
His arms looked really thin when he was playing or when he was on the bench, but he looked better now. So Portland, Chicago just played each other. Dame hit an amazing shot at the buzzer to Chicago.
Can we just
too good?
Like that guy.
This is also what I don't understand, right? Damian Lillard has twins and just plays out of his mind. Reggie Bullock has twins and he plays like shit. It's just not fair. It's not fair. I would have thought that having children would have made Reggie Bullock twins. That would have been double the power, double the firepower. Listen, didn't matter. Sorry, Reggie, but
a month from now, after my wife pops, if I'm coherent on here, you should all be thanking your lucky stars because Christ, oh my God.
But this is your NBA,
Yes.
Because you're teaching and you're also providing excellent Knicks content. So it's a little different.
It's a little bit too kind there. All right. So you went 5-5. I'm going to be the Donald Downer. I'm going to go 4-6. Debbie Downer, Donald Downer, whatever. Someone down. I'm going to go 4-6, which I don't want to.
Yeah.
But if
they playing your way though,
if they did go 4-6, they would be 13-18, right?
4-6. Yeah. That's,
Oh man, 14-17 sounds so much better than 13-18, but you picked that. You snatched it from me. Deep throat. Damn it.
There's the third time. Rule of 3.
I'm actually in the mood to watch All the President's Men like a week or 2 ago. I think maybe I'll watch it today.
When you said watch it, and then you clarified with All the President's Men, I was like, all right. Yes, it's a great movie. All the President's Men is a fantastic movie. Love it. Really well done.
My wife, I don't think my wife has seen it. I think maybe that's what we're going to do. I'm going to try to bang out this newsletter in an hour and a half and then put the kid to bed, 7:00, pop on All the President's Men, taking a little Bob Redford, young Bob Redford.
Yep. Dustin Hoff, D Hoff.
Some other nice performances in that movie. Okay, we're done here. Thank you everybody for listening to it. It's tragic. Thank you everybody for listening to another episode of the Knicks Film School Podcast. I'm gonna go eat my salmon. Jeremy is gonna go light candles and do whatever else he does in his spare time, and we'll be back with you with another episode very soon.